Imagine a single day that changed the fate of a nation forever. A day soaked in blood, ambition, and destiny. October 14th, 1066. The winds of England carried the sound of steel clashing against shields, the cries of men fighting for kingship, and the roar of history being written. This is the Battle of Hastings, the battle that would decide who ruled England and ultimately shape the language you speak today. Picture this. England was a land on edge. King Edward the Confessor had died without an heir. The throne stood empty, and that vacuum of power drew predators from across the sea. Harold Godwinson, a powerful English noble, seized the crown, but his grip was not secure because far across the English Channel, William, Duke of Normandy, claimed that throne was his by promise and by blood. Now, imagine William hearing the news. Harold crowned as King of England. Betrayal, rage, determination. The Norman Duke was not just angry, he was resolute. He would not let his claim be snatched away. He rallied his lords, summoned his knights, and built a fleet the world had never seen before. Hundreds of ships, thousands of soldiers, and a dream to carve his name into history. But Harold wasn't going to give up his new crown without a fight. The English king had just fought off another invasion in the north against the legendary Viking Harold Hardrada at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, a brutal victory that left his army exhausted. And yet without rest, Harold marched his men south, covering almost 200 miles in just a few days to confront William. Imagine the strain. Armor digging into skin, blistered feet, men collapsing from sheer fatigue. Still, they pushed on because the fate of England hung in the balance. On the night before battle, two worlds stood on the edge of collision. The Normans, disciplined cavalry, armored knights on horseback, the best warriors Europe could offer. The English, tough, battle-hardened infantry, forming a fearsome shield wall on the ridge of Senlac Hill. Both sides believed God was with them. Both sides knew that dawn would crown a king and crush another. As the first rays of sun broke through the mist on that fateful morning, drums thundered, horns blared, and banners of lions and crosses danced in the wind. The stage was set. Hastings was about to erupt, not just into a fight for a throne, but into a turning point that would forever reshape the destiny of England. So how did this day of blood and fire unfold? How did William, a duke from Normandy, rise to become William the Conqueror? And why does this battle still echo through the centuries? Stay with me, because what happens next will shock you. The morning air was sharp, filled with the smell of damp earth and the heavy tension of what was to come. On the slopes of Senlac Hill, Harold Godwinson's men formed their line, a wall of shields so tight it looked like an iron fortress. Shoulder to shoulder, spears angled forward, axes gripped with white-knuckled fists. These were not just soldiers, they were farmers, blacksmiths, fathers, men fighting for their land, their families, their king. They knew what was at stake. If they lost today, England would belong to the Normans. Down below, William's army stretched out like a sea of steel. Knights mounted on war horses snorted and pawed the ground, eager to charge. Banners of Normandy fluttered proudly, and in the center, beneath a golden standard, sat William himself, his mail glinting under the pale October sun, his gaze fixed on the English line. He was calm, but inside burned an unshakable resolve. Today he would win a crown or die trying. The first move came from the Normans. Archers stepped forward, bows creaking as they loosed the first deadly rain. Arrows hissed through the sky, but the English shield wall held firm, a solid barrier deflecting most of the storm. Men grunted as shafts thudded into shields, and a few unlucky souls fell with screams, but the line did not break. Harold stood at the center, urging his men on, his voice cutting through the chaos. Hold the line. Frustrated, William unleashed his cavalry. The ground trembled as armored horses thundered uphill, hooves churning the soil, lances aimed at the English ranks. The sight alone could make weaker men flee, but not these warriors. The shield wall braced, axes swinging in deadly arcs. Horses crashed against shields, knights toppled, and the hillside turned into a slaughterhouse of iron and flesh. The English roared in triumph. Wave after wave of Norman attacks broke against the unyielding wall. Hours passed, blood soaked the ground. The Normans began to falter, and rumors spread through their ranks that William had fallen. For a moment, chaos gripped the invaders. Panic whispered like wildfire. But then through the smoke, William appeared, ripping off his helmet so all could see his face. "I live!" he roared, lifting his sword high. "Rally to me!" His men cheered, their courage reignited. Then came the twist, the moment that would decide the battle. William, a cunning commander, saw that brute force alone would not win against the English shield wall. So he played a deadly trick. He ordered his cavalry to feign retreat. The Normans turned and galloped down the hill, as if fleeing in terror. The English, believing victory was at hand, broke formation to chase them. That was the fatal mistake. The Normans wheeled around like wolves, cutting down the scattered English in a savage counterattack. The once solid shield wall crumbled. Panic spread, and into that chaos, William drove his knights deep into the English ranks. Amid the clash and screams, Harold fought like a lion, his axe rising and falling, cutting through armor and flesh. But fate was closing in. High above the battlefield, an arrow arced through the smoky air and struck Harold in the eye. The English king fell, and with him the last hope of his army. By dusk, the hill was carpeted with the dead. The English had fought bravely, but they were broken. William stood victorious, a duke no longer, but a conqueror. But what came next? How did William turn this bloody triumph into control over an entire kingdom? How did the Norman victory reshape England's future, its culture, its language, even the very way you speak today? The answer lies in what happened after Hastings. And trust me, that story is just as dramatic. The battlefield lay silent now, except for the cries of the wounded and the moans of the dying. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the blood-soaked earth of Senlac Hill. Harold Godwinson, the last Anglo-Saxon king of England, lay dead among his warriors, and with him ended an era. William of Normandy had triumphed, but victory on the field was only the beginning of his challenge. Imagine this. William stood among the carnage, the stench of death heavy in the air, knowing the hardest part was yet to come. Conquering a kingdom was one thing, keeping it was another. England was not a prize easily claimed. The people were fiercely proud, deeply loyal to their old ways, and they would not welcome a foreign ruler without resistance. So William moved swiftly and ruthlessly. First, he secured the south coast, ensuring no English forces could regroup. Then, like a storm rolling inland, he marched toward London. Villages burned, towns submitted, and the road to power was paved in fear. By Christmas of 1066, William reached Westminster Abbey, and there, under the flickering glow of torches, he was crowned King of England. Picture the scene. The air thick with incense, Latin chants echoing off stone walls, the glitter of gold crowns and holy relics. But outside those walls, tension boiled. The English nobles watched in silence, their hearts heavy with resentment, knowing their world had changed forever. And William made sure it did. He unleashed a transformation that reshaped the very soul of England. The Anglo-Saxon aristocracy was stripped of power, their lands seized and handed to Norman lords, loyal to the new king. In their place rose towering stone castles, symbols of dominance, rising like iron fists over the English countryside. These were not just homes, they were fortresses, a constant reminder that rebellion would be crushed. But William's conquest didn't stop with swords and stone. It reached into the very language of the people.
The court
Before
recognizes the
Hastings,
defendant's plea.
English was a tongue of rugged simplicity, short, strong words born from Germanic roots. After Hastings, the French of the Normans poured into it like wine into water. Words of law, government, art, and fashion, court, justice, beauty, noble, all came from William's world. Even today, when you speak of a beef dinner instead of calling it cow, you're echoing the Norman influence. The Normans also changed how justice was enforced, how taxes were collected, even how history was recorded. William ordered the Domesday Book, a vast survey of every acre, every plow, every person in his new kingdom. It was power written down in ink, a medieval database that declared, "This land is mine." But make no mistake, this was not a peaceful transformation. Uprisings erupted from the north to the west. Rebellions flared like sparks in dry grass, and William stamped them out with fire and iron. The most infamous, the Harrying of the North, a campaign of brutal devastation that left fields scorched, villages empty, and famine stalking the land. It was William's way of sending a message. Defiance would be met with annihilation. And yet, despite the blood and the fire, William's grip held. England bent beneath the Norman yoke, and slowly, painfully, it adapted. The Anglo-Saxon age was gone. In its place rose a new England, an England tied to the continent, ruled by kings who spoke French, and destined for centuries of rivalry with France. Think about that for a moment. A single battle, one day in 1066, shaped the politics, the language, and the culture of a nation for generations to come. Without Hastings, there might never have been an English empire. No Shakespeare as we know him, no modern English as you speak it today. But what about the man who started it all? What became of William the Conqueror after his great triumph? His story didn't end with the crown, far from it. His reign was marked by both glory and darkness, triumph and tragedy. And in his final days, the mighty conqueror would face a fate no one expected. William the Conqueror had won the greatest prize in Europe, but the crown he placed on his head was heavy, so heavy it nearly crushed him. Being King of England was not the end of his struggle, it was the beginning of a lifetime spent defending what he had seized in blood. Imagine William in his royal hall, a man of towering will, his armor set aside for the robes of state. He spoke French, his court was filled with Norman lords, and yet he ruled a land of English hearts, still raw with anger. Every shadow hid a whisper of rebellion. Every noble smile concealed resentment. William could never relax, not for a moment. His solution? Power built on fear and stone. He dotted England with castles, cold gray fortresses like the Tower of London, rising above the Thames like a clenched fist. From these strongholds, Norman knights enforced William's will, their mailed fists crushing uprisings before they could spark into flames. And make no mistake, there were uprisings, again and again. In the north, whole regions rebelled. William's response was merciless. The Harrying of the North, a scorched earth campaign that burned crops, slaughtered livestock, and left famine in its wake. Thousands starved. It was brutal, it was ruthless, and it worked. But William was more than a warrior. He was a ruler with a vision. He ordered the Domesday Book, a record of every village, every acre of land, every ox, every pig in his kingdom. It was an accounting so thorough that even today historians marvel at it. Why? Because William wanted control, and knowledge was power. The Domesday Book told him who owed taxes, who held land, and where wealth flowed. Nothing escaped the king's eye. Under William, the fabric of England changed forever. Norman law replaced Anglo-Saxon custom. French words flowed into English speech, shaping the language we speak today. The nobility spoke French, the peasants clung to Old English, and over centuries the two blended into something new. Middle English, the ancestor of the modern tongue. When you say words like justice, castle, or court, you're speaking William's legacy. Yet for all his triumphs, William's final chapter was one of irony. In 1087, while waging war in France, the conqueror, who had bent kingdoms to his will, fell, not to a sword, but to his own body. A horse stumbled, crushing him beneath its weight. His injuries festered, and weeks later, William the Conqueror lay dying in Rouen. The scene was grim. As death crept closer, his court abandoned him to plunder his treasures. The man who had commanded thousands was left almost alone, his great ambition reduced to whispers in a darkened chamber. When he died, his swollen body would not even fit in its stone tomb without breaking. The funeral was chaos. The mighty conqueror was gone, and yet his shadow stretched across centuries. Because William left more than a crown, he left a transformed England, an England bound to Normandy, an England of castles and knights, of feudal lords and royal decrees. The Anglo-Saxon world was gone, replaced by a kingdom that would one day rule an empire. All because of one day in 1066, on a hill near Hastings. And that is why the Battle of Hastings is more than just a clash of swords. It's the moment England became what we know today. The language you speak, the laws you live under, the history that shaped nations. It all traces back to that October day when two armies met and one man carved his name into eternity. So now I want to hear from you. If you could step onto that battlefield for just one moment, what would you want to witness? The roar of the charge, the clash of the shield wall, or the coronation that followed? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this journey through history gripped you, give this video a like, hit that subscribe button, and ring the bell so you never miss a story that changed the world. Remember, history isn't just about the past. It's the story that shapes who we are today. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep exploring the echoes of history.